Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to continue looking at Jupiter's entrance into Gemini, which is coming up at the end of this month of May. And today in particular, we are going to look back at some of the most recent Jupiter in Gemini periods. We'll date back 3 or 4 of them. They happen about every 12 years. And I will give you some tips for tracking those previous transits and give you some examples. I have some examples from my own life and from 2 anonymous clients who were gracious enough to share some of their story with me and grant me permission to use it here on my YouTube channel. So that should be interesting today and give us more ways of preparing ourselves for the upcoming entrance of Jupiter into Gemini here at the end of May. So anyway, that's our goal for today. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments and reflections if you have them. We always like to hear from you guys. And you can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. 2 promotions for today. One is I am giving a talk monthly now. I'm doing monthly webinars. The talk for this month is happening May 16th. And it is a talk that I am giving on Neptune's entrance into Aries, which happens next year. But Neptune is culminating at the 29th degree of Pisces before it stations and turns retrograde right now. And so it's a really good time to start preparing ourselves for the archetypal meaning of Neptune in Aries. This is a very powerful and very, very different place for Neptune to be entering compared to Pisces. I've titled this talk, Neptune in Aries, When the Ocean Turns Red. And I can guarantee that Neptune's entrance into Aries is going to do some very powerful things, both in the collective and our personal lives. And so we're going to look at that and start getting ourselves familiar with Neptune in Aries and looking at it historically and personally. We'll do that May 16th, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. When you register, if you cannot attend live, we send you the recording link afterward. You get a recording link either way, but if you want, you can attend live as well. We send you the webinar link as well. And then in June, I'm looking at the 12th house, healing potential of the 12th house in your birth chart, and Uranus in Gemini, another outer planetary shift we're expecting in 2025 that we'll be looking at and previewing in July. So those are the next couple of webinars. If you go to the courses tab and look at the first year course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, we start June 16th. It's a new program, a 1-year program in ancient Hellenistic astrology. Everything I teach also comes with that fusion of modern archetypal and psychological astrology. It's just a part, it's just baked into who I am at this point. But if you scroll down at the bottom, you'll find the early bird payment plan and the early bird upfront payment. Both of those sales are only available until May 15th. So when you pay in full, you save a significant amount off the normal tuition or the tuition payment plan, whichever you choose. If you need tuition assistance, you can also apply for tuition assistance, pick your number within a sliding scale. We match you with a payment plan that fits your budget. And that is for people who, for one reason or another, you're struggling financially, need a little bit of help to make the program possible. We want to make sure nobody's priced out. If you stick around after today's talk, when I log off, I've edited on a video where I go into greater depth and detail about what the program includes and why I think you might like it. So stick around for that. It's a really good time to study astrology as Jupiter is entering the sign of Hermes and trining Pluto in Aquarius. It is just the ability to comprehend the larger systematic philosophy of ancient astrology is it's a really good time for that kind of endeavor right now with these 2 planets getting together under the start of our June program. There's been some programs in the past that have been like this, and I've found over time that these are some of the most powerful that I teach. There's just some that are aligned with astrological signatures of learning a little bit more than others. I think it's always a good time to study astrology, but this transit is pretty unique as a starting point. So I do recommend checking it out if you're on the fence about it. Anyway, okay, so on to our exploration of Jupiter in Gemini. So we are going to track prior Jupiter into Gemini periods. And what I want to do first is look at this upcoming period, remind us of the timeline, and then go back in time. So we can see that at the end of the month of May, Jupiter is entering Gemini, and it is doing so right about the 25th of May. And then if we take this forward a full year and go just a touch into June, we'll see that Jupiter leaves Gemini and enters Cancer around June 9th, 10th of 2025. So it's a little bit more than, it's about a year. And that's generally speaking the amount of time that Jupiter takes per sign. Give or take some retrogrades across sign boundaries and so forth, you get about a year per sign, 12 years in total for Jupiter to go through the entire zodiac. And so every 12 years, we get Jupiter back into the same sign. So, what we're going to do today, in order to understand where things might be heading, let's look to where things have gone in the past. I am going to pull up, I have 4 previous Jupiter in Gemini periods, along with stories from myself and 2 clients who were generous enough to share their stories. And the point of this is not to tell you exactly what's going to happen, but to get you in the habit of thinking about what has happened and try to connect the dots thematically. Now, this tends to work best for people who have good memories, but you can, if you don't have a great memory, start journaling about the periods of time. And if you just start free flowing with journaling about the period of times, these periods that we bring up, you will find that you'll start remembering and seeing the presence of the archetype at work. So let's go backward in time. The most recent period was between June of 2012 and June of 2013. Let's go back to June of 2012. And here you can see that Jupiter enters Gemini right around June 12th of 2012. If we go forward about a year, we'll see that Jupiter is culminating in June of 2013 and enters Cancer right about the end of June. It's like June 26th, 25th of 2013. So June of 2012 to June of 2013. Again, if you can't remember things right away, then one thing you can do is start journaling. And the journaling will not only bring things up immediately in the actual process of journaling, but it'll also start to jog your memory, and things will start to come up in the days and weeks ahead. So and you might even start dreaming about that period just by bringing it to your attention. Now I'm going to share with you my story and 2 other stories with different house placements. But remember that the horoscopes we did at the beginning of this month of May were in part directed toward the whole sign house of Gemini in your birth chart according to your rising sign. So you listen to the rising sign horoscope and you'll hear us talking about the topics of Jupiter and Gemini in your birth chart. Whole sign houses represent the house system that ancient astrologers used for a very long time. Indian astrologers still use it today. So as a Hellenistic astrologer, I use that house system, and it is also the kind of house system that all horoscopes are written under, which is why people say listen to your rising sign, because that then corresponds to the whole sign house version of your birth chart, which means the transits every month you're hearing are the actual locations that they're moving through in your natal chart by whole sign. So as a whole sign astrologer, I recommend that you get in touch with the topics of the house of Gemini in your birth chart. Once you know those topics and refresh on them, you also immediately know what area of life to be thinking about when looking back on these periods. So again, if you need a refresher, go to the May horoscopes that Alex and I did. All right, well, Jupiter and Gemini from June of 2012 to 13. I'm a Taurus rising, so Gemini falls in my second house. It's the next house in order. Second house has a lot to do with things like business and resources, money and finances, and so on. So during this time, I had just previously, like within 6 months prior to this, moved in with my now wife, but at the time we were like a newly formed partnership dating. And we moved in together and had started a yoga studio out of a big house that we rented in DC, in the DC area. So it's called Sky House Yoga, and it was a home-based yoga studio. And right as Jupiter moved into Gemini, I helped Ashley set up an herbal apprenticeship program using the same kind of organizational style that my astrology programs had been created with. So then we had a new stream of revenue for our business and a kind of marriage of apprenticeship programs that we were both teaching and taught for many, many years to come. Not only that, but we started many programs during that first year of launching our community yoga studio. And so there were just many, trial and error, many different, um, what do I want to say? Entrepreneurial endeavors and opportunities, and some things worked and some things didn't. But it was the establishment of an expansion of our business, and I happen to also have my marriage house ruler in my second house. So it was a year of the growth of my relationship with my wife and our business together, and that was the main thing that was happening then. Well, Jupiter was in my second. So now I want to jump around a little bit because here we have this is these are ninth house Gemini stories. So in every previous period we're going to look at, I'm also going to share with you a ninth house Gemini story and a seventh house Gemini story. So when you have Gemini in the ninth house, you guys may know that that means you're a Libra rising. So that activates the topics of things like education, travel, religion, spirituality. So to the most recent period for this ninth house Gemini, between 2012 and 13, she began her first formal astrology program after being interested in it through as a hobby for a long time, and it happened to be my program. And so the programs that I was in the process of developing and launching at that time for this individual, when Jupiter entered Gemini in their ninth, became their first formal, like study course. And it was pretty primitive at the time. Like it was pretty basic. But anyway, so this first formal astrology program coincided with that year. It started in June of 2012, and she finished that program about a year later. So this is the same Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic program I have been running in June and November, dating back to the start of my career. So I've been teaching it for a long time. So that coincided with her first year of studying astrology formally. At that time, the program was more psychological and evolutionary, and it's become, I changed my focus to Hellenistic. So it's interesting to see, how things have changed over that time for me as well. But anyhow, and then let's go to a seventh house Gemini story. So if you're a seventh house Gemini, that means you're Sagittarius rising. So this person in 2012 and 13 moved back to the United States after being located abroad for their husband's job. They were living internationally in Europe and had moved there because of their husband's job. And then they moved back to the USA because of their husband's job. So I think that's really fascinating because in this case, you have Jupiter in the seventh house of marriage. And during that year, there's a new opportunity that for their spouse that brings them back to the United States. And more on that story in a minute because it has a cool connection to an earlier period. All right. So the point is track this by whole sign, right? Look at this previous period. What was going on? Think about the streams of mercurial information and learning and the different kinds of possibilities. And it's like a busy beehive. Where was that busy beehive happening in your life between 2012 and 2013? All right, let's go back in time. Jupiter was also in Gemini between June of 2000 to July of 2001. Let's pull up the chart and take a look at it. Going back, here we are. Here is June of 2001, or 2000, excuse me. You can see Jupiter entering Gemini about June 30th. And then if we go forward a full year, we'll see Jupiter culminating in Gemini at the end of June and entering Cancer, leaving Gemini right around the middle of July. So June 2000 to July of 2001, about a full year, Jupiter was in Gemini. What do we see around that time? Okay, so I'll share mine. During that time, that was the summer after I graduated high school. I had already been going to a community college, acquiring college credits that doubly counted toward high school graduation. There's a program in Minnesota. I think they have it in other states too. Anyway, so I was like a dual enrolled community college high school student. And I took those credits and went to a college and decided during that period to focus on philosophy, and was studying philosophy during that period of time. And really starting to open my mind to the possibility that I know this is going to sound really basic for a lot of you, but I was raised a preacher's kid and I went to a Christian school. And during this time, I was opening myself to universalism, which at the time to me meant that the Christian message was found in many other religious traditions, and that there was a current of universal, um, like a universal theology that was allowing me to go beyond the limits of my Christian faith while not abandoning it at the same time, the core of it, or something like that. Um, this was, in a sense, the exact development that would lead to me experimenting with psychedelics within almost just a little bit over a year after the end of this period. Um, and then gradually opening myself to things like astrology and yoga and so forth. So, this Jupiter and Gemini period coincided with the opening of my mind and the development of a course of study that would eventually lead to my career. It's in a very early stage. Like, I never would have guessed that it would be astrology, but this period was a very intensive period of study where I was developing some of the tools and resources intellectually and the broadening and opening of my mind intellectually that would eventually lead to a very like alternative philosophical theological path in my life. So it's kind of interesting that that was the main thing that was happening around that time with respect to the development of my career, my eventual ways of earning a living in the world, and so on. Well, let's hear from that ninth house Gemini story. So, what I thought was interesting is, remember we said first formal astrology program for this one was 2012 to 2013, ninth house Gemini. 2000 to 2001, she had her first psychedelic experiences and also became interested in yoga. And you have to remember, around 2000 to 2001, yoga was still very young in the United States in terms of there weren't a million yoga studios around. So this was a pretty radical mind-opening experience for her as well. I think that's interesting that Jupiter in Gemini is frequently coinciding with people sort of questioning and redesigning their worldviews and really opening their minds. Such a Jupiter in Gemini kind of thing. So she got into yoga and had her first psychedelic experiences. Very ninth house Jupiter in Gemini, and very simple and very basic, but that was what stood out to her when I asked her about that time period with respect to religion, spirituality, and so forth. How about that seventh house Gemini friend of ours? Well, this is what's so interesting. In 2000 to 2001, during the previous Jupiter and Gemini in their seventh house of marriage, they moved to Europe for the husband's job. And then under the subsequent Jupiter in Gemini period in the seventh house, they moved back to the USA for the husband's job. They have been identified more as a full-time parent. And so this is not like someone who felt like their husband was dictating their life. They were very excited to move, from what she said, and like just genuinely excited to be like, well, let's go live in Europe, you know? So they moved to Europe for husband's job. And then next Jupiter in Gemini comes into the seventh and they move back. I think that's really fascinating to see the correspondence like that. So anyhow, what happened for you? Look at the whole sign house and remember that it doesn't have to be like mind shattering, time and space bending connections. They can be very simple themes. Look also at the span of a year. What were you learning? What was shaping? What was expanding? What new possibilities? How was your mind opening? Like, think Jupiter in Gemini. All right. Well, let's go back. Let's go back again in time. This time, we're going to go to July of 1988 to July of 1989. And I'm going to put this up on the screen. Let's go back in time once more. You can see here in July of 1988, Jupiter enters Gemini in July. Let's fast forward it a year, and we're going to see Jupiter culminating at the end of Gemini and then moving into Cancer right around the beginning of August. So yeah, July of 88 to July of 89 is the easiest way of putting it. Now, for me, I'm starting to get I'm pretty young. I was born in 81, so this was the summer of my turning 8 years old. well, I guess if you go to 89, so it's like 7 to 8, 7 to 8 years old. So during this time, my father received his first promotion. And as a result, our socioeconomic status changed, which as a little boy, I was not super aware of, but I noticed like, oh, we're living in a nicer house. Um, not, I mean, if you know anything about the way that ministers are paid, it's not much, but for us, it was still a bump because it did constitute a little jump in his career status and so forth. So Jupiter in my second house from 88 to 89, we moved and my father received his first promotion and our socioeconomic status improved a little bit. And beyond that, like I entered a new school. And in that new school, I was the new kid. Even in the second grade, that was still felt. So a change in socioeconomic status and a change in schooling. And that happened while Jupiter was in Gemini in the second. And those are the only things I can really remember from that period. I'm sure if I asked my folks, they'd say more. But all right, let's go back to those ninth house Gemini stories, the Libra rising individual. So remember that in 2012 to 2013, there was the first formal astrology program. In 2000 to 2001, they had their first psychedelic experiences, got into yoga. This person's a little bit older. In 88 to 89, they graduated college. So this was a culmination of education. What I think is interesting is, and I'm just sort of anonymizing this, this individual did not go on to use the subject. You know, their degree is not exactly what they ended up doing with their life. Very Jupiter and Gemini. I've graduated and I'm off to totally different things. So, but they did graduate college in that time. So see how basic it is, right? It doesn't have to be like this crazy story. It can be super common. All right, let's go to our seventh house Gemini. This is a Sagittarius rising individual. Remember, in 2012, moved back to the USA for husband's job. In 2000 to 2001, moved to Europe for husband's job. Well, in 1988 to 89, they were married. Right. So this, again, both individuals a little bit older, but and you will find that like for myself, it gets harder to locate storylines because I'm significantly younger than both of these people. And so, you know, they've got 20 plus years on me if I am around there. So anyway, it's harder to locate things the further back you go, you know, both because of memory and in some ways it's just like the karma doesn't, for a lot of us, the more poignant karmic stories seem to develop as we get into our 20s and beyond. Not obviously there's exceptions to that, but you know, like you're going to feel if you're tracking like a Pluto transit that you had when you're 8, there could be very big events that happen in your life at 8. But my point is for Jupiter cycles, like it may be, they're not like as crazy intense as like Pluto crossing your ascendant at 9 and, you know, your whole family blew up or something. You know, it's like, so anyhow, hope that makes sense. Now I'm going to give you one more period, even though this is where my tracking stops. If you wanted to, you could go back to April of 77, all the way until April of 78. That is another Jupiter in Gemini period. I was not born and I didn't track with either of these clients back that far. But you could go back to this period if you wanted to. And I'm not going to bring that one up on the screen either, just give you the dates so you can work with them if you want to. And that, my friends, is it for today. Why do this? Let's remind ourselves, because sometimes you will see literal continuity, like I got married, we moved for job, we returned from job for husband, like that. It's not always like that. It's not always like the periods are like so intimately connected. Sometimes they are though, and it can be really cool to actually discover that by doing this simple historical tracking. On the other hand, one of the things that I would, just generally speaking, is the reason that I think this is such a great activity is because what you'll do when you just sit with it and do some journaling is you start to remember the presence of the archetype. I mean, we started yesterday by talking about some of the signatures of Jupiter and Gemini, which we're going to continue doing as we get closer to Jupiter's ingress. But you take that archetypal information and you apply it to these previous periods and you look for the God in the life. And when you discover it, it's remarkable. And if you don't, for whatever reason, don't worry about it. Like, again, memory is at play. Sometimes you don't know exactly what to look for, or you'll miss something that was there that you don't necessarily see as an expression of the archetype. And sometimes it's hard to be objective, and it's hard to see archetypes, especially if you're not used to doing it. But anyway, when you locate those archetypal themes, it also makes you more aware of the archetype now. That as it comes in for the next year, you can that historical awareness brings awareness into the present. That's the point. All right. Well, that's it for today. Stick around after I sign off if you want to learn more about the upcoming program. We start June 16th as Jupiter enters Gemini and trines Pluto in Aquarius. It is a fantastic cosmic signature for the studying of a vast, 2,000-year-old celestial science of omens and the divinatory worldview of astrology. If you want it to really deeply permeate your life and create spiritual healing and growth and transformation, study astrology, and study astrology under a good astrological configuration like this. That airiness will take you to 20,000 feet and just help you see the landscape of this beautiful hermetic language. I also want to make sure if you listen to what I have to say about the program after I sign off, you'll notice that we do have flexible pricing. So make sure you take advantage of that if you're someone who wants to take the program but needs to work within a fixed budget. We understand and appreciate that people are coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and we want to make sure that we maintain astrology's accessibility as we keep handing us as one small part of the entire community, handing this knowledge on to the next generations. All right, that's it for today. Have a good one. We'll see you again later. Bye. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, my year 1 course in Ancient Hellenistic Astrology that begins on June 16th. If you'd like to learn more about it, of course, you can always do some digging and looking at the course page on your own. I'll take you over there right now and walk you through it. But if you want to, you can go over yourself and look. Nightlightastrology.com is the website. Click on the courses tab and go to the first year course. This is the one that begins on June 16th, the perfect place to start for people who would like to learn more about natal astrology from the Hellenistic point of view. So this is a 1-year course in Hellenistic astrology, which is the oldest form of astrology, and it is the form from which all subsequent forms of astrology come from. It shares a lot in its roots with ancient Indian astrology. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what characterizes Hellenistic astrology, but just to familiarize you with this page, when you go to the first year course page and scroll down, you can learn more about everything that's included in the course. Some of the main features include 30 classes on the year. These classes are spread out through units of curriculum. And in between the major units of curriculum, we have breakout study sessions led by our tutoring staff. We also have an interactive group forum discussion that is staffed with tutors year-round. You always get your questions answered within 24 hours. So there's a lot of support built into the program as we work our way through the curriculum. We also have recommended reading, listening, optional quizzes, flashcards, bonus lectures, more than you could possibly read in a year, honestly. So we just have a large and long biography and sort of library of suggested bonus content that will fill in blanks and also supplement and deepen the material that we are studying. You get lifetime access to all the recordings. If you cannot attend the webinars live, they meet on the weekends, but if you can't attend them live, then you are welcome to follow along with the recordings, which are made available to you on the class website. So this class meets on Sundays from noon Central to 2 p.m. Central, or 1 Eastern to 3 p.m. Eastern time. And you might translate that, I guess, if you're on the West Coast, it would be 10 a.m. to noon Pacific time. During the program, in addition to working our way through all of the major curriculum, the major foundational elements of Hellenistic astrology, we place a strong emphasis on preparing ourselves to read charts for other people. Whether this is a hobby for you or something that you are endeavoring to practice professionally, the course is built for people who are really there for a lot of different reasons. This is your hobby, this is your passion. You hope to do this for really no one other than yourself, or maybe friends or family, or someone who really decides they want to start a practice. You can take this class at whatever level of interest or depth that you want because of the amount of material that we make available to you inside and outside of class. You always have access to the program too, so you can always, take it at your own pace. You can attend live, follow along with the recordings, some combination of both. And then the breakout study sessions are really helpful in addition to our interactive group forum discussion. You can always ask us questions. You can email me anytime with questions. So we have a lot of support in place. Now, the curriculum, we move through the foundational elements of ancient astrology. You may look at the curriculum and say, well, I know something about these things already, but not really, not unless you've studied Hellenistic astrology, because the way that ancient astrologers talked about houses, signs, planets, aspects, essential dignities, chart delineation is radically different from what most people learn when they start studying modern astrology. The reason for that is that it's only been in the past couple of decades that we have finally had access to the vast majority of ancient texts on Hellenistic astrology. We were literally missing the bulk of our ancient tradition. So the kind of rebirth or reawakening of ancient astrology is really new, which makes this very exciting because everything you've learned in modern astrology is probably coming from the lens of what is called psychological astrology, which is a way of looking at the birth chart in terms of the planet signs, houses, and the way in which they may relate to your psychological makeup or profile. In this way, birth charts are a little bit like an elaborate Myers-Briggs. So you have the personality profiling, which is the way that most people look at planets, houses, and signs. You'll notice my Mars, my Venus, and they think of them as aspects or dimensions of your character and personality. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, we utilize much of the same language, and we certainly have that approach available to us in this program because ancient astrologers also looked at the chart in terms of psychological makeup. However, one of the main distinctions between modern astrology and ancient astrology is the emphasis that ancient astrologers placed on prediction. They looked at the chart in terms of a field of karma that defines the native or the individual's fate or destiny. And so we look at houses, signs, planets, aspects as a way of understanding what patterns, themes, and topics are going to be most prevalent and at what times, because they also had a very elaborate system of timing techniques. The year one program is all about learning to read the birth chart and understanding the ancient Hermetic sort of Platonic Pythagorean philosophy that was behind the establishment of all of the doctrines and teachings of astrology itself. So it's really about understanding where everything comes from. It's the why behind everything that greatly empowers people when they're learning astrology. It is not nearly the same when you just study lists of adjectives and descriptions for houses, signs, planets, aspects. We want to understand why. Why do we do these things at all? Where did it all come from? And when you understand that, then you have something like a skeleton key by means of which you can access your own creativity, your own intuition, rather than being told, just play these notes in this order and it will sound good. You're learning to improvise. Which, could anyone ever want to play? Why would you want to play an instrument if someone told you, well, here's how to play this, play that, and you never learned how to play something of your own, or you never learned how to use the scales in ways that were magical and, pertain to your own genie, your own genius. So when we study ancient astrology, one of the main things we're doing is we're taking people beyond anything that they think they've learned about houses, signs, planets, aspects, and we're teaching them where it all came from. And once you have that, then you're really cooking with fire. You have a magical, intuitive capacity that is very rare and precious in astrology. So anyway, we move through a lot of different elements, but not in the way that you've ever learned them before. And that's a really important distinction. So anyway, after all of that has been said, in each unit, we spend, maybe up to 10 hours on houses. And then we have a breakout study session, and then we have reading and bonus material. So when we talk about houses in this class, you are learning where the concept of a house ever came from in the first place, what it is, how it works, and how it's different from a sign. You're also going to unlearn and break a lot of bad habits, because not by any intentional ignorance, but modern astrology, being bereft of its ancient textual tradition, has been teaching a lot of things that are just not in line with where the actual theoretical foundations of astrology come from. So you're also going to break some bad habits, which is really good for people who maybe know a little bit about astrology already, but are seeking to clarify and understand theory in the context of the 2,000-year history of astrology. So anyway, this class is going to prepare you to read birth charts for other people, but then by the end, one of the great things about the program is that the way we do that is not just by pumping you full of theory and history and philosophy. We are also, in the last portion of the program, inviting live clients into the class. And that's great because when we have live clients come in, you're going to see me read from them using the theory and techniques that we've been studying. And you're going to see how they can be applied artfully, as well as, giving you some tools and methods and techniques to use to set you up for success. Seeing live astrology practice while studying it is the best way to learn. So the last portion of the program, we turn toward that hands-on approach. Anyway, so that's a bit about the program. If you have any questions you want to ask, email us, info@nightlightastrology.com. We're happy to answer any questions you have whatsoever. I also want to point people to the payment options at the bottom. Early bird payment saves you $500 off. That is a great way to save. The payment plan is breaking the tuition into 12 monthly installments. If that works better for you, no worries, you can do that. And then need-based tuition. We, for many, many years now, dating back to 2010 when I started teaching astrology, I've always had some kind of sliding scale option available for people when studying astrology. Sacred science like this should be accessible to people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds. So we pride ourselves on making sure that there is tuition assistance available, so that if your budget doesn't match with the payment price that we ask for, and that's an honest assessment that we trust you to make, that you can take advantage of the tuition assistance and set your price within a sliding scale that we provide for your monthly tuition for 12 months through the program. So please feel free to apply for that if it makes sense to you. We don't want people hurting themselves or overextending themselves. A price that fits your budget is available through the need-based tuition. We just ask that you apply early because we do fill up sometimes. So anyway, that is it. I hope that you will consider studying with us, and thanks for taking time to learn more about the program. See you later.